Welcome to the latest episode of Inside the World of Sports. I'm so excited to be talking to my next guest, Mark Medina. Mark, how are you doing?
Brian, all things considered, I'm hanging in there, but hope you're hanging in there as well and to join you on the pod.
Thanks. All right, tell me about your career, how it started.
Wow, it's been quite a journey. Should I start, my latest gig or just the industry itself?
Yeah.
Or college? Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm in my second year of USA Today as a national NBA writer, but before that, I was covering the Warriors for 2 years with Bay Area News Group and the Lakers for 5 years as a beat writer with the LA Daily News and 2.5 years with the LA Times. But, there were a lot of pivot points to get to that point. I basically knew what I wanted to do as early as 8th grade. And so I got involved with my student newspaper and was able to get some freelance work with my hometown paper, the York Daily Record in York, Pennsylvania, to do some high school games. And then went to college at Syracuse, really good journalism school, and then did a lot of internships in the summer with Inside Lacrosse Magazine, the Washington Times, Syracuse Post-Standard, Richmond Times-Dispatch. So, how I got started, it dates back to my childhood with wanting to get involved with this and growing up being a sports fan and loving to read and write and watch the broadcast. But, clearly it was kind of one of those things where once you got the foot in the door with getting hands-on experience, that led to the next door and also tested, not only your abilities and willingness to do it, but if I still loved the craft, and I still do. So I'm thanking my lucky stars that, it's worked out the way it has.
Yeah, I'm an aspiring sports radio host. So I've started this podcast to kind of try to get my name out there, and I'm trying to get an internship in the summer. All right, what advice would you give to people who want to be in the sports media field?
Well, honestly, it really depends on where that person is specifically in their life. So, I mean, if it's someone that's in middle school or high school or college, the best piece of advice I could give is just latch on to whatever hands-on experience you can get that's available. I think in that point in time, there is a danger for, some aspiring writers or broadcasters to think, well, I want to, cover the NBA or I want to cover the NFL or Major League Baseball. And it's really good to always be ambitious, but there's always kind of an in-between of, okay, well, how do you get to that destination? And so I think, the importance is understanding the value in gaining whatever hands-on experience you can get, even if it's not glamorous, even if it's in a small market, even if it's unpaid, just with the hope that you're, building your skill set and being able to learn however you can. Now, I think once you're in the field, it then depends, where you're at as far as what advice I would give. If you're having a job where you have an internship or full-time job, my advice would be, taking ownership of whatever beat you're given at that time and developing, news stories and enterprise stories that show that you're taking ownership of that specific beat or expertise. And then, pitching your work to editors, mentors for feedback, and then just networking as much as you can. I mean, the unfortunate reality is that it is a relationship business, and that I think can be a positive because you're talking to people, you're getting feedback, and you're leaning on that. But the negative part of that is sometimes it involves who you know as opposed to what you can do. And sometimes with that, there's elements of, to what extent does being in a privileged background help with that? And so it's a lot of murky waters that our industry is tackling with that and trying to be inclusive and giving people fair opportunities. But I think if nothing else, the best thing, regardless of whatever circumstances that you're under, is taking most advantage of whatever hand you're dealt, and then hoping that that can lead you into the next destination that is either the final destination or can lead you to that ultimate goal. But a lot easier said than done, given the world that we're in, and also just how the industry's changed with, the evolving technologies and how, companies are under pressure with, being able to be profitable given the loss of revenue that a lot of print publications have been in, as well as broadcast channels have been in with the cord cutting. So it's a very challenging industry to navigate for sure.
Yeah, I'm a big Lakers fan, and it's been an interesting season. What are your thoughts on the season so far? And right now, I'm kind of worried because we just don't know when AD and LeBron are going to come back, and even when they do come back, assuming everything goes well, they still kind of have to build some chemistry with the new guys the Lakers have recently added. What do you think?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. What was your final thought?
Yeah. What do you think? What are your thoughts on the Lakers season so far, and what do you think they have to do to repeat?
Yeah, well, I mean, the bottom line, for better or for worse, is that their success or failure, frankly, hinges on a pretty simple idea that how healthy will LeBron James and Anthony Davis be when they come back? And, you never know with injuries, but talking to outside medical folks, I did a piece for USA Today specifically on LeBron James's injury, and even with how long he's been out and he's up there in age, at age 36 since 18th season, I don't think there's a lot of concern with how he's going to be. But I think there's question marks on how Anthony Davis will be. But I think all things considered, when you take it into everything into account with those injuries, the short turnaround between their championship run and the beginning of this season and the new pieces, they're still in a pretty good position. Maybe they were hoping, hey, they'd be first in the Western Conference, but being fifth isn't all that bad, since there's not going to be as much of a home court advantage. And the feeling is that, assuming LeBron James and Anthony Davis will be fully healthy because of the extended time they've taken off to heal those injuries, that, they're still two of the five best players in the league, and that makes a huge difference. But at the end of the day, you still never know. I mean, it's been a real unpredictable season.
The Lakers, I feel like they need at least maybe another point guard and maybe a longer wing, because like if you look at their wings are kind of short, and when you deal with like the wings in the West, particularly with the Clippers, how are you going to match up with them? The question is, who would you get rid of if you end up doing that? Do you think the Lakers are fine as they are? Maybe they should consider adding the pieces I just mentioned.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, I think the ship sailed with the trade deadline, and they've already done what they've done in the buyout market with getting Andre Drummond. Look, I think, obviously they have shown some struggles, they've shown some flaws, especially without LeBron and AD in the lineup, where their three-point shooting is inconsistent. Their rim protection isn't the same as it was last year when they had JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard. But I think all things considered, they're still a pretty good team to be reckoned with. Now, again, their whole identity is built on LeBron and Anthony. And now that's not to say that the team is a team full of scrubs that aren't competent, but they were built to complement them, not replace them. So yeah, sure, they can use another wing. They could use a point guard, but I think the bigger needs that they had entering the trade deadline were more about having another big man because of AD's absence and Marc Gasol's inconsistency, and then having some three-point shooting upgrades. Now, they did a little bit of that with Game McLemore, but again, these aren't game changers. That's, the buyout market never really is a game changer. So I think all things considered, some of those weaknesses aren't as prevalent simply because I think Dennis Schroeder's still a great point guard. And also, as far as their wing presence, I think Kyle Kuzma is a young developing guy. And, when LeBron James is out there, that solves a lot of things. But we'll see if that's enough when you're, comparing the rest of the field in the West with the Utah Jazz. They've been top five offensively and defensively. The Clippers, added Rondo, and, they have, with exception to replacing Serge Ibaka for Montrezl Harrell, they have a lot of, the guys from last year's team back. The Denver Nuggets have been, really good with adding Aaron Gordon to that young core with Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. And, obviously the Phoenix Suns making a step with their young roster in addition with Chris Paul. But I think when you consider all those variables, I don't think that the Lakers necessarily squandered an opportunity or missed a window to address those parts simply because of what was available at the time. And also, I think that they had a little more pressing needs at the center spot and, having some 3-point shooting.
All right. What are your thoughts on Frank Vogel's contract situation? He was initially given a 3-year deal. And I think they kind of did it to match up with LeBron's deal, which was all right. But I think he deserves an extension. It'll be interesting to see this offseason what they do, because it'll be second year out of the 3-year deal. Do you think they give him an extension? And if they don't, do you think there's a chance he may not want to coach the Lakers next year without one? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's honestly way too early. My understanding with his deal, it's a 4-year deal, but a team option on the 4th. So I think these conversations, they would be had before the beginning of next season or during next season. And so he's not like a quote unquote lame duck. But right now, they don't have any misgivings about Frank. They obviously won a title last year. They've liked how he's managed the group. So there wasn't any expectation that they would spend this season or last off season negotiating a deal after his first year. So, I haven't gotten any indication that there's any misgivings on either side about their future because, so far it's been good.
All right. If you had to pick who'd be in the finals today, who would you pick? Right now, if I had to pick, I'd probably go with the Clippers and the Nets, but it's really wide open. Who would you think would be in the finals today?
Yeah, well, the caveat I share with you it is wide open. So, but if I had to predict, I think it's going to be the Lakers and the Nets. I think with the Nets, it's hard to diminish the star power they have with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and James Harden, and then who they got in the buyout market with LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin. So even if there's some defensive deficiencies and 3 main all-stars have only played 7 games together, so far they've been really good because of their depth and offensive firepower. And as far as the Western Conference goes, I still think at the end of the day that the separation with how good LeBron James and Anthony Davis are when they're healthy is still pretty steep compared to the rest of the field. But that is a question mark. And so they can be vulnerable. But I think because of how patient the Lakers have been with their rehabs and just the nature of both of the players' respective injuries, I'm pretty optimistic that, not to say that they'll be 100% healthy. No one in the league is ever 100% healthy at this time, but that there's no major debilitating things that will be holding them back once they're back on the court. So that's my pick, but there's a lot of good candidates in the East and the West that could make a case to get to the finals.
All right, finally, if there's one thing you'd like the NBA to change in the offseason, what would it be? If I had to pick something, I think what they did with the season started in December. I really like that. And I think that's something they should consider doing moving forward.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that I'm someone that's in the middle as far as the length of the regular season. I don't subscribe to the notion that they should reduce the games in half or anything like that, because I think that there is a value in how, coaches and players kind of manage the marathon. But I would say at the same time, 82 games, I think is too long. And there has gotten to a point where it's very clear that the value of a regular season game has diminished. And I don't fault the teams for thinking big picture because they want to protect their players' long-term future, as well as the players themselves. But my outlook on that happening, I think will never happen, because the simplest answer to that is the money. But you're also looking at the many parties involved that are part of that pie. You're talking ownership, you're talking coaches, you're talking players, you're talking, concession worker and behind the scenes staff, all of those parties would all take some sort of significant pay cut if that were to happen. And so with that, I don't think it would happen. But I think the product would improve if maybe they reduce the length of games from 82 to maybe 70 or 66. But at the end of the day, that would be a hard goalpost to move because there's a lot of affected parties in play with that.